What would you do for a free t-shirt? So, leave a review, get a free t-shirt. Before I basically post this video, I just want to note that this is what prompted me to basically make it. So, I have to leave a video review of my champion product and post it to YouTube or Vimeo, or rate a review of the product on visiting the website, blah, blah. And as a thank you for your time, they'll send me a free champion t-shirt. To renew this offer, simply email us a link to the posted video or product review, blah, blah. And if for any reason there's a problem with any product, please contact our technical support team, blah, blah. So, all the good stuff. So, I will note that recently, I was having some issues with my old whippersnipper. And I basically had to go get a new one. And for the past, long while, I've only ever used electric trimmers. So, I figured this time around I'd basically try a gas one. And the one I basically got was a curved shaft trimmer, model number 100683, operator's manual is right here. And this is what it looks like. Anyhow, I'm going to assemble this beast and then continue this video. Until then, be right back. Alright, so the operator's manual. Before I basically continue with the manual itself here, I want to note that the company who basically manufactures this curved shaft trimmer is actually called Champion Power Equipment. I didn't actually state that yet, so I just want to state it right now. And I'll note that basically when we go back to the end of this manual here, I'll basically use some contact information for the company. So you can basically see this is basically based out of California, USA. And I just want to note that because it is based out of California, they have a lot of safety laws down there. So you can basically just see it sieving through the bits and pieces of this manual all over the place, but whatever. Now obviously I'm basically up here in Canada. And I'll note basically on the reverse side, my manual here, it basically has everything in French. So for those basically looking for a French instructions, there is instructions of course on the back side of the manual. So yeah, manual de operator for whatever, the French. I speak English though, so we'll stick to the English side and we'll just go from here. All right, so I have assembled this grass trimmer already, but I basically want to cover the operations manual because well, basically the operation manual is basically something you want to read whenever you basically operate something like the grass trimmer or a heavier piece of equipment like this. So you actually can see from their instructions here as well on the 7th page right there. First thing, read operator's manual. Duh. Alright, so now that's basically out of the way. I'll note that in terms of this manual here, I found it to be competent and basically helping me get the grass trimmer assembled and covering basically a lot of the safety tips and features that I basically have to look out for when basically operating the grass trimmer. I'll note that it's basically got a table of contents here, basically detailing safety first, then it goes to controls, assembly, operation, maintenance. And then you eventually get down to specifications and troubleshooting. So all technical stuff basically later half, all the important stuff getting it up and running first half. Now, I'll note in terms of the safety instructions, good job. Champion, you did a good enough job basically that if I could, I'd give you 5 stars for your manual. But going on further basically with the manual here. Now I want to note them basically in the controls and features, and going from there basically we'll basically jump into a section basically for the assembly, operation. And as I'm basically this flicking through these pages here and looking at the pictures, I'll note basically I see a hand here, I see some feet here, but there's not a whole lot of human body parts being represented in these pictures. And of course we get down to like specifications where like, you know, it's just like the like, you know, the parts of like the beast, so to speak. Now, I'm basically bringing this up because something I've always basically found important for like, you know, males of this type. You want to basically have like, you know, human bodies being represented in your pictures, so basically you can see like, you know, how it is we're supposed to be like, you know, positioned when basically, you know, we're holding like certain like, you know, pieces of equipment. I'll note basically for like the pictures for like, you know, the writing basically for like this manual. I know that, for example, this isn't going to be like, you know, something that a left-handed person can operate safely. Just for a simple reason that like, you know, parts of like the machinery are basically on like the wrong side for like a left-handed person. But for the most part, I didn't find like the instructions here to be like, you know, all that thorough, basically like, you know, telling me like, you know, how I'm basically like supposed to hold this like, you know, this piece of like, you know, equipment basically like, you know, in operation. It basically like, you know, word stuff. So basically like, it describes like, you know, you have to lay it flat on like, you know, a surface to like, you know, refuel it. You have to lay it flat on like, you know, a bare surface to basically start it. And it basically, you know, says like, you know, later on like the like, you know, instructions basically for like, you know, holding the thing. Let's just jump to those like right there. Basically right here, it's going to tell you like, you know, in operation, you have to maintain a firm grip on both handles while trimming. Obvious, you know, obvious. Hold the trimmer with your right hand on the throttle and the left hand on the front handle, and then keep the string, you know, string head below the waist level. Now, I want to note that basically, like, you know, these instructions here, for example, like they are like telling you basically what you're supposed to do, but they're not really like, you know, telling you basically like, you know, well, let's just put it this way. I'll note that a big thing about this like this manual that I think like, you know, is kind of flawed. They don't have a like, you know, a consistent record basically of like, you know, terminology. So something over here is like, you know, you basically have like, you know, controls and features basically like, you know, describing like the different parts of like the trimmer. And you basically have like, you know, 4 for like stop switch, 5 for like the throttle trigger lockout, and 6 for like the throttle trigger. And I'll note that basically right here, this section here is obviously the throttle. Though I'm not really like, you know, sure basically like, you know, basically like, you know, when I'm holding the throttle, for example, do I have to hold like, you know, one of like the throttle triggers when it's in operation and stuff like that? I don't know. I'll note that's actually something that's like, you know, not really like listed in here. It basically like, you know, says like you're supposed to hold the throttle, but it doesn't really tell you like, you know, if you're supposed to be holding any triggers or anything like that. So some like details basically in here are sort of like lacking, I think, or could be like, you know, better explained. And, you know, another thing that could have helped with that basically was having like, you know, fluid by people. So you could basically have like, you know, a picture like, you know, in like the operation here of like someone basically like, you know, holding like the front hand with like the left hand and like holding like the like, you know, the operation trigger with like the right hand. You know, basically like to imply like, you know, this is basically how you're supposed to hold it and stuff like that. But overall, so this manual here, basically in like the like, you know, describing like how you're supposed to operate it and like get it assembled, it did a good enough job basically like, you know, telling me how I'm basically supposed to like, you know, build like the machine. And I'm basically like, you know, probably gonna be able to operate it. But I feel at the same time, after reading this manual, I'm going to need like you know, needs like some support from someone who basically like, you know, is familiar with like the machinery. This is of course my first gas trimmer, so I want to basically like, you know, trying to like, you know, take best care of it as I can, obviously. But I'm probably gonna have to basically ask for like help. And if a manual's basically like, you know, not covering enough that I basically have to go and ask for help, I think it's basically failed. So yeah, the manual could use some work, just to throw it out there. But anyhow. Alright, so here she is assembled. So I'll note that basically this whippersnipper, you have to assemble it yourself. It came with an Allen wrench, and I used that to basically secure both the grass shield down here, as well as the like, you know, handle basically you hold with like your left hand. Now, in picking this up, I'll note that most of the center mass for it is probably just around right here. And I'll note that this is like fairly close to like the engine. And then of course there's like, you know, the shaft down there. So fairly typical, like, you know, you can probably expect for like, you know, most like grass trimmers. Most of the weight is basically concentrated in the engine, or where like all the power for like the mechanism basically come from. Now, I'll note that basically, like, in like, holding this, it's quite heavy. It's not like so heavy that, like, I can't lift it with one hand here, but um, I could probably, like, see this being something that might be, like, cumbersome to like someone who's like a little bit like weaker than I am. This is throw out there, a woman, for example. Not really sure, like, how much that might come into play, or like, what it'll be like, just basically to hold this like for a long period of time. I'll note that basically in the, like, manual, it described how, like, watch out for vibrations, because it can cause issues. Not sure if this is something I had to throw it in there or whatnot, but whatever. I'll note, by the way, like, all over the whippersnapper, you'll basically see, like, little safety features. So there's like the safety message, like read the manual, other stuff. There's some more basically over here. So basically, like, here's like the, like, thing about the engine. So do not touch. There's the hot part of, like, the engine right there. And then over here, you'll basically see, like, all about, like, starting her up, basically. Just gonna lift her up here. This is what the back basically looks like. There's our choke. There's the top of, like, the fuel. Now, there's a few things I basically want to point out about, like, about the grass trimmer that I don't like. So first things first, I'll note that in the instructions, it basically said you don't want to fill this basically up like past 8%. This, like, fuel tank. Now, I don't know basically, like, how much 8% of, like, this fuel tank basically is, but there's, like, no, like, reference to, like, where, like, 80% might be. So where, like, a fill limit might be. And it feels like, something that, like, really should have been included for, like, the device basically, like, how full you can basically like, fill, like, the fuel tank and stuff like that. Probably won't be, like, filling it that much, because I don't plan to use it that much, especially this year, but something to throw out there. Alright, so other things basically note. I'll note that basically on top of my, like, little barbecue pit here, I have a few other things. So I'm actually gonna be skipping one of, like, the steps basically for, like, running my machine. And I actually have something called True Fuel here. As you can basically see, it's ready to use for 2-cycle engines fuel. And I bought this so I could basically, like, not have to worry about, like, pre-mixing fuel. So basically it's pre-mixed already. I'll note that basically this did come with, like, his, like, 50-to-1 like oil. So you can mix this into, like, gasoline if you need to like, do that sort of thing. But basically I bought this with the machine, like, the grass trimmer itself, so I wouldn't have to worry about that. Also bought quite a bit of whippersnapper wire. This is what basically is, like, on sale, that, like, was basically recommended to, like, be bought along with it. So heavy duty tri-edge trimmer line, the ugly line apparently. I don't know how much this is going to basically come into play with, like, running the machine, if I'll basically, like, degrade the performance or anything like that. I have no idea. But I bought that stuff because, like, that was basically what was recommended on the homepage for, like, the item I basically bought. Now it's getting too late basically to, like, use the trimmer right now. Basically it's like in the evening, late in the evening at this point. But well, she's ready. I'll see how she basically goes when I basically get her to go, and let's go from there with the review. So I'll note at this point that I fueled up my trimmer here. Now, I'll note that basically for my purposes, I don't need to basically fuel this up too much, I think. But as you can see here, basically you can, like, see, I guess, like, through, like, the tank itself, like, how much fuel is basically in there or not in there. But again, like, where it's, like, half full or, like, fully full, you can't really tell. And of course, because I'm not, like, holding it level right now, you can't really tell if it's basically, like, below 8% or not. But there we go. Just put it on the ground. I'll note basically for filling it up, it wasn't too hard. I had to find, like, a funnel, but for the most part, basically, like, it's a fairly simple affair. Now, I'll note because basically how, like, the gas, like, tank is basically, like, positioned. I need a very small funnel basically to like fit into like the gas tank itself, because you know, a large one won't work. But other than that, like, you know, it filled up fine. Now I've yet to basically start, but I figured before I actually start, I should actually show off a little bit about, like, you know, what I'm going to be using it for. So this is basically my backyard here, and I plan to like use it, the whippersnapper, to like, you know, trim out all around like the you know, the edge of the house here, for example. And in a few spots you can basically see that, like, you know, there's quite a bit of, like, you know, built up weed that, like, I've yet to basically get to because I didn't have a whippersnapper. Besides basically cutting around the house, there's also other areas of, like, you know, interest as well. So I'll note that basically around this like fence area here to like my neighbor, there's a little bit of, like, you know, built up grass that I have basically to cut through. And a lot of the stuff will basically have, like, you know, stones and stuff, like, you know, inside, so I have to be like careful of that. But we'll see how, you know, the trimmer line basically, like, you know, works with that, I guess. Now as we get further along here, you'll see like it gets, like, you know, much more denser, the foliage. And I will be basically cutting this down for, like, you know, well, obviously, like this rose bush right here, for example, I'll obviously cut around and like, you know, the rose bush, and, like, you know, cut down the, like, you know, stuff around the roots, so basically see the roots, and that'll help with, like, watering and stuff like that. Here's the back of the house, basically, more basically to, like, you know, cut around. And then, of course, there's like stuff there in my garage. There's more spots around the house basically I'll be cutting, but just to like show, I basically have a good mix of stuff basically cut with the trimmer. And I won't actually be showing off, like, you know, the actual affair of me, like, you know, cutting it down, because obviously I gotta use two hands to hold the trimmer when I'm using it, but whatever. I'll be right back when I basically, like, you know, get started, and well, we'll see how it goes from there. Alright, so I used this for the first time to do a little bit of whippersnappering then, where I basically said I would. So I'll note that I basically had, you know, as I saw in, like, you know, last little bit of video here, quite a bit of, like, you know, foliage that basically I've cut down. And it did a reasonably good job basically cutting stuff. There's a few areas where, like, you know, I could probably touch up a little bit, or at least try to, but, you know, as I said, rocks are, like, you know, in play, so I have to be sort of careful around them. Over here by the rose bush, I basically want to expose its roots. Basically, I can actually see where I'm basically watering. It's not perfect, but at least it does a good enough job. I basically see where the roots basically are. One here to the back, and as you can see here, it's a lot more clear now. You basically can see the ground. You can see, like, you know, a little bit around this tree, though the tree is basically in the way, so I didn't really get too far into it. Overall, a reasonably good cut basically from, like, you know, the new whippersnapper I basically just used, and I'm quite content about it. What I'm not content about, though, is how long it basically took to basically get this thing started. So I'll note that I basically tried to get this basically started by myself initially, and for the most part I failed. I start with, like, the warm start. Probably a bad idea because, like, it's my first time starting it, so didn't work. Went to the cold start, primed a few times, pulled the cord a few times, primed again, pulled the cord. Eventually, when I got some help, basically get started, and well, my friend who I basically brought was able to get started, but there are still issues. Once it was actually started, and, like, you know, I was able to use it to basically do stuff, I'll note that the whippersnapper wire down here, initially it was working fine, and then, like, you know, it wore down quite a bit. You know, want to bump it, nothing came out. So got my friend out here again, and he basically took it apart, and I basically found out that the cord here was apparently, like, tied. So not great. Now I don't know if these are, like, you know, major issues. I'll note that my friend basically said, like, you know, starting up a gas whippersnapper is always a chore, and, like, you know, his last one basically, like, you know, it takes, like, you know, 18 press to, like, you know, get to basically start. Not sure that'll be the case with this one, like, you know, on the second time basically going, but, you know, just want to throw it out there that, like, you know, these are gas trimmers, of course, so different from like electric ones, which are a little more easier to get started. Now, I'll note that basically using this, for the most part, I didn't have much problem basically, like, moving around, like, weight wise. But when basically the vibrations are like going to play here, this whippersnapper vibrates quite a bit, and it really did show. I'll note that basically, like, my hands aren't exactly shaking or anything like that, but I could definitely feel the vibrations, like, as I basically went along. Now, I'll probably keep going, but, for the most part, I just want to basically make a quick video, basically, showing what I basically did, and, like, my thoughts basically at this point. We'll see basically in the second try, when I basically get around to it, if, like, there's going to be issues then. But for now, it's not doing too bad, at least for like, at least doing a job it basically needs to do. So I'll just keep at it and see how it goes from there. Alright, so I'm actually not done my first session of, like, trimming this yet, but I figured I'd basically note this here. So here's basically the trimmer wire I basically used in, like, my first session here. And there's not much left. Now, I want to note that I'm not really going to complain about the wire basically comes with. Obviously, you can replace that with, like, better wire when I get around to it. But something to note basically about, like, this here. I've had a whole lot of trouble basically with, like, the whippersnapper wire, in that I've had to replace it, like, manually quite a few times. It says it comes with, like, a bump feed system, but I've noticed it doesn't work if you only have, like, one piece basically out. And essentially, what's basically been happening here is that, like, I'll basically go along with, like, the whippersnapper, and this is basically where the wire comes out over here. The wire will basically, like, get to the point where it's, like, not even coming out of here at some point, and at that point no longer bump feeds. And as a result of that, I basically had to, like, take this apart, like, a few times now to get this basically out, thread it back in manually, and then go again, so to speak, until it, like, hits, like, the end again. I'm not sure that's basically, like, what's supposed to happen, but yeah, it's just something to note. Like, it seems like a good idea, the bump feed system, but at the same time, you basically have to, like, go back to it, quite a bit basically to refret it, unfortunately. Quite, if, like, one side basically, like, cuts off right inside the, like, the thing here. Anyhow, I'm almost done. I'll get back to you when I am, and we'll go from there. The job is done, finally. Although I basically had some difficulty starting it up, as well as difficulty refretting the wire every so often, but the job is complete. Now, overall, for a first session, yeah, it was a chore, basically getting this started and, like, getting the first, like, session round done. I don't know if it'll be, like, this bad, like, starting out for a second time. Usually these machines, they get easier to operate, like, the second, third, and, fourth time, so on fourth after that. But for the most part, I'm more or less content with, like, my whippersnapper. It did its job. And, well, I'm not, like, suffering any permanent damage from, like, vibrations or anything like that, so I think I'm good enough for as well. So, I'll note that basically if I was to get this as a star rating, I'd probably give it a 3 out of 5 stars. I dock at a point basically for its manual, and I dock it for its points, like, with, like, getting it started, and, like, the refred, like, issue basically at the start there. But, it's not exactly a bad whippersnapper. It does its job. Hopefully it'll basically start the second time, basically come around for it. But, if there's a issue with it, I'll basically, like, add something to this video, and we'll basically, like, see it there. But for now, first video review, basically, like, I'm content with my, like, whippersnapper. Hope you guys find this review useful, and take care.